So before I introduce our next speaker, I want to take a minute to welcome our friends from the Florida Association for Women Lawyers, a summit sponsor and supporter. We now have some fall members joining us via webinar for our morning presentation, and this will serve as an official kickoff to their inclusion webinar series. I welcome them to our conversation, invite them to grab a pen and paper, and thank Fall for their partnership. Now, I first met Tracy Yench when I called to ask her if she might consider helping me assemble a panel for this event. But I had learned about her from her students and our graduates who are fortunate to work in her firm, Ford Harrison, because they tell about the helpful, compassionate, and passionate, approachable, spirited, understanding mentor who is also a talented and skilled and brilliant litigator with a thorough understanding of her clients' needs. When my colleague Corey Henson and I met with her over lunch, we were kind of awestruck as she rattled off ideas, names, offers to make calls, and wonderful stories. Tracy is a force. She's the kind of person you hope you'll meet, who has a great many answers and a generous willingness to share them with you just exactly when you need them. She gave me the confidence that I needed to continue on this path and make this happen today. She oversees the 7 Florida offices of Ford Harrison LLP, one of the largest labor and employment firms in the country. Tracy is one of the 3 founding board members of the Florida Diversity Council, which now comprises 35 corporate board members supporting diversity and inclusion in companies and communities throughout Florida. She served as co-chair of the Women in Leadership Symposium in Tampa Bay for the past 4 years and of the Healthcare Diversity Symposium as well. She's listed in Martindale-Hubbell Bar Register of Preeminent Women Lawyers, the Best Lawyers in America for Employment Law and Litigation, Labor and Employment, 2006 to 14, Florida's Legal Elite by Florida Trend magazine, and was named one of the top 50 female lawyers in any field in Florida, top 25 female lawyers Central, Northern, and Gulf Coast of Florida, and Florida Super Lawyers 2006 through 14. She's received both the Most Powerful and Influential Women Award in Florida, the Glass Ceiling Award. Are you making faces back here? I know you are. Gravity?
It's very good. It's very good.
Ms. Yench was recently named a 2015 Women Worth Watching by Profiles in Diversity Journal. She's board certified by the Florida Bar as an expert in labor and employment, and is also the managing partner of the firm's Tampa office and serves on the firm's healthcare practice group committee. And she earned her JD from Stetson University College of Law in 1991, and her BS from the University of Florida in 1988. Here's Tracy.
Thank you. Thank you. So I recognize so many people in the room, and I'm so thrilled to have all of you guys here. We have a panel of lawyers who I'm so proud to have you listen to their stories and learn a little bit more about them personally. Their bios, now that they said my bio, I want to go through all their bios, but we can't. But they are all that and more of what you just heard about me. I'm going to have them introduce themselves in a moment, but briefly, I would just want to tell you a little bit about our firm's journey, and then I'm going to show a short video that hopefully will kind of put you in the mood to hear the panelists. 10 years ago, Ford and Harrison started our commitment to increasing diversity and inclusion in our firm. And our partner, my partner who's here, Dawn Seiler Nixon, was charged with heading up that initiative. And I can tell you from her experience and my experience, her book of business and her production took a humongous nosedive, okay, when that happened. And that happened for a number of years. These are the kinds of commitments that people make in firms. Dawn was viewed, I think, as doing something that was only important to a very few people in our firm. She got a lot of pushback in creating some of the programs that our firm has, over the 10 years, learned to embrace. I'm glad to say she's back on top, but you know, what we did was we looked at the sort of the W's of what were we? We were, back then, a Southeastern law firm headquartered in Georgia. I don't think it's any mystery that we were predominantly white male at the time. We had very few female partners. We had even less female equity partners. We had no one on our executive committee who was female, let alone someone of color. So we started really with looking at ourselves and just saying, what do we currently have? And so we've done a number of surveys internally, and some of them have been really kind of bracing and, you know, probably embarrassing, but, you know, you have to start somewhere. So that is where we started, all the way down to our staff. It was anonymous, of course, but getting some feedback on what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong. And we've continued to do those kinds of surveys over that 10-year period. We've had almost 100% participation, partly because people like me, people like Dawn, people like our managing partner have made participation mandatory. And sometimes that's a negative, but it's got to be mandatory, at least in the beginning, to have it have any meaning at all. So I'll play this real quick just because I'm just playing it. And then after that, we'll talk to the panelists a little bit about how they see their lens. If you've read Vernee's book, it's fantastic. We read a lot of these things. Some of them, truly, you don't feel like you've learned anything. Vernee's book is really very compelling. So after Vernee, who does work with our firm as well, came and did a presentation for us, I showed this. I'd just become regional managing partner, and so I showed this to my group of 50 lawyers, just to get to know me a little bit better and get to know the firm and the journey that we've taken in terms of the lens that I come from within my firm. So,
I like to sometimes think of a bike as a metaphor for movement and adaptation. My father was an amateur bike racer when he was a kid, grew up in Berlin, Germany, born in 1940. He lived there until he was about 14, and until the Nazi party took over, and his father was in a prisoner of war camp for a number of years. He moved to Canada and immigrated to the U.S. when he was 16 years old. He met my mother in New Jersey. He moved to Long Island, and the two of them went to college at Rutgers University, and Douglas was the women's college at the time. My mother was Jewish, my dad is not, and so I like to think of myself as a mixed race child. My parents got married in 1963, and soon thereafter, my father went to Vietnam, and we lived in the Panama Canal Zone, where I was born in 1965. We moved around a lot. My dad stayed in the military. We went to Michigan, Kansas City, ended up in D.C. where my dad worked for the Pentagon, and my mother continued her education, getting a master's degree in English and teaching English. My brother and sister were born in D.C. In 1970. They are twins, fraternal twins, and we continued to move a lot. But little known fact, while my father worked at the Pentagon, he also was a speechwriter for Nixon and worked with a lot of the people who you may know from that time period. We continued to move quite a bit, ultimately landing in New Jersey. Most of my growing up time was in New Jersey, but in lots of different houses and different towns, so I ended up going to a lot of different schools and always having to be the kid that would look for someone to sit with in the lunchroom. My parents divorced when I was 11, and I graduated high school early at 16 in 1982. I was thrilled to not only get out of the house, but to go to college, and I was happy to be in college at 16 years old. I have always been sustained by reading and art, and double majored in English and art in college. After graduating from college, of course, like the rest of you, I went on to law school. I have always been an athlete and continued to play both soccer and to run in law school. I wasn't sure what to do after college. I graduating with a double major in English and art. I wasn't sure whether to be a teacher or an artist, but I had planned to go to law school when I first went to college, and spent most of my time shopping at thrift shops while in college. And after taking off for a year, I decided that law school was really where I wanted to be. I wasn't interested in being a starving artist, as some of this art shows. I graduated law school in 1991, and unfortunately, although I had big dreams of taking a break after law school, 1991, as many of you know, is kind of like now, was a huge law school recession. No one was hiring. I ended up finding a job with a commercial litigation firm in Tampa right after law school, and my dreams of taking a break didn't materialize. I ended up doing wills and sitting at big tables, doing bond transactions, lots of commercial litigation. As many of you know, after the big bond deals, people would go to strip clubs, and Tampa was kind of known for that. I remember probably one of the worst depositions I ever took, where I was doing collection work and asking how much this guy's wife's ring was worth. I ended up later in 1996 discovering the Alley and Alley source book and discovering employment law. I remember vividly going to the Alley and Alley offices, which were pretty much a warehouse with a junkyard dog barking on the outside. The inside of the offices were loaded with stuffed animal heads. It was what might now be called kindly as a sweatshop. John Edward Alley and Bob Hall kind of expected 5,000 hours as a minimum, and would make the joke that you were going home early if you left at 8 o'clock at night. Tampa was the first merger for Ford and Harrison in 1996, and as you now know, we've gone on to have offices in almost every large metropolitan area in Florida. We have a very diverse office in Tampa, and I'm proud of that. Meanwhile, I do have a personal life. I was made a partner by Ford and Harrison back in 2000 when I was pregnant and on maternity leave, and I'm very proud of that fact and proud of the firm for doing that. I have a 13-year-old son and a 24-year-old stepson. I got married when my stepson was 7 to my husband Tim, who went to Embry-Riddle and is a pilot and ran airports, and now for the last 17 years he has run a business where he makes airport products and services. Meanwhile, my parents have been married separately 3 times and 4 times respectively. Adapt, grow, and learn has been my creed. As you can see, I've had a peripatetic life in some ways, although traditional in others, but I'm a huge believer in learning to grow and adapt and change. And this theme of innovation this year, I think, is a wonderful one, and something that I support tremendously. I am very proud to be the regional managing partner of the Florida offices, the best offices at Ford and Harrison.
So I show that to you for one reason, well, among some reasons. My son put that together in 5 minutes, okay? If any of you have sons, maybe girls play them too, and you recognize that theme song that's in the background of that ringing in your ears, that is Minecraft. That is from Minecraft. My son, and many of you know, this new generation of lawyers are going to be able to do that in 5 minutes. Maybe they're not gonna be the best writers in the world, but they're gonna be able to put together a multimedia presentation like that. So let me turn it over to the panel, because I want us to talk about, how do different lawyers at different parts of their careers in firms, in in-house positions, and in the judiciary, how has their lens changed? How has it impacted how they view the people that they work with? And what are the kinds of things that firms can be doing to increase inclusion, at least that they see? So, Catherine, why don't you start and introduce yourself? As I say, I wish the bios are awesome. Read them. These people are amazing.
Okay, I also know many of you in the room. I'm really excited to be here. I'm so grateful that I was invited to speak at this. My name is Katie Christian. I'm an in-house counsel at Duke Energy. I manage the litigation for Florida. And before I became an in-house counsel, I worked at a Tampa law firm for about 7 years, who is sponsoring this event. Hi, Mac. That's a pretty broad topic, and I really do appreciate the theme of being open. You talk about your motto. My motto is clarity and courage. And so I think one of the biggest things I felt like in my career is I felt like a statistic. I feel like I've become a statistic. I'm like the woman who couldn't make it at a law firm. But I think there are a lot of different reasons for my career path that don't have to do with sociological factors or gender or anything other than I'm a lot happier being in-house. I think that we talking about some of the assumptions that we made about ourselves. Growing up, I was told, I'm 35, I grew up in the 80s. As a woman, I was told I can do anything. I can do anything I want. And I can be anything I want, and I believed that. And it wasn't until after I had my son, who is now 5, that it really hit home that I can't do everything I want. I'm just talking about this is my experience. I don't know, I'm just gonna talk about my experience and how I felt about it. I felt like I couldn't manage my career, my husband. I'm now divorced, my son. I felt like I just couldn't manage all of those things and also develop a book of business in the way that I wanted to be successful at a law firm. I wanted to have $1 million book of business. I didn't want to just be a partner or just be an of counsel. And I just couldn't do it. And when I left the firm, I left with, it was like my Jerry Maguire moment. I wrote this one-page piece of paper on what firms need to do for women, and I just turned it in on the way out the door. And going through that process, I realized it's not a woman issue, it's a family issue. And today I'm realizing it's not even a family issue, it's a personal issue of having to decide for yourself how you're going to balance these things. Some of the things on the list were you need to provide childcare for the days that I have to be here until midnight working on a brief. I need childcare when my kid is sick. That was the hardest thing to do was, okay, I've got a hearing, I've got a deposition, I can't stay at home with my kid. What am I supposed to do? Daycare won't take him. I mean, there are all these really practical problems that go along with this that businesses, I don't feel recognize and support, and we just need help. And like I said, I felt like it wasn't a woman issue. I feel like the men that have young children, that are married to women who are working, 50, 60 hours a week, they have a hard time balancing these things too. anybody who has a family, men, women, you've got partners trying to raise kids or twins. I don't know where Joe Morrissey went, but it's just like, how do you solve these problems without investment and help from our society, from our businesses, from our employers, and from our families? That's all I got for right now.
Thank you, Catherine. Luis Santos, also Stetson grad. Are you a Stetson grad? I am. All right. Yeah, we got all Stetson grads up here, just not on purpose, just happened to be that way. But Luis, briefly, give us a little bit about your background and your sort of lens and how you see things.
Well, first of all, thank you all for having us here. I'm flattered to be able to sit here with this great panel, a group of leaders in the community. Like Tracy said, I graduated from Stetson actually in 2010 and went straight to Ford and Harrison. But just to share a little bit about my background, I'm from Dominican Republic in the Caribbean. Moved from there when I was about 8 or 9 years old to New York City, lived in Brooklyn for probably about 6 or 7 years, then moved to Orlando, then went to school in Miami, then came here for Stetson, lived in Tampa for about 6, 7 years, and now I'm back in Orlando and just kind of commute back and forth. So I've been all over the place. So I know Florida very well, at least some of the major hubs, not North Florida, because no one really goes there unless they have some deposition or something like that if you're a lawyer. I would say my experience at Ford and Harrison, particularly because I've only worked there since law school, has been great because of their diversity efforts. I think one of the things that drew me to the firm was exactly that. I remember Stetson had their annual diversity picnic in the Tampa campus, and I met, I think, Tracy, Kelly, some of the other lawyers that worked for the firm there, and I was very drawn to their approach, their diversity efforts. I think right before then I had met another firm, which I would not name. It's a big firm in town, very well known. And I remember having an interview with them for a summer job, and being Hispanic and being diverse, and I know the big diversity movement that's going on, I asked the question, what are your diversity efforts? What are you guys doing? What's your viewpoint? And I remember one of the not the managing partner, but one of the equity partners telling me, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I said, well, I saw on your website that you have this big diversity thing going on. And he's like, yeah, we don't really pay attention to that. We have a department that handles that. I see those emails and I just hit delete, And that automatically told me, well, that's not the firm I want to work at. I think for employers, if you're trying to recruit minorities, and I shouldn't call them minority, just diverse, so that includes, gender, female issues, whatever it might be. I think it's important for any employer, for any firm to be aware of what your diversity efforts are and to be a part of it. It shouldn't only be a marketing strategy. Because you are going to get someone like myself that's going to ask the question, and you don't want your response to be, I don't know. I think it says a lot for that firm, and again, it's one of the major powerhouses in Florida. And 6, 7 years later, every time I think of that firm, that's what I remember. So you're going to lose clients and you're going to lose potential talent. I think hopefully Tracy thinks I've been an asset to the firm, and maybe that firm could have had me, but they didn't over that simple mistake. So I think, my experience has been great because of the vast efforts that Ford and Harrison and the resources they've implemented into diversity. We've worked with Verna over the last year on a lot of different diversity issues or challenges within the firm and within the profession. And I think Ford and Harrison going above and beyond and recruiting her to work with us shows what our efforts are and why I love it there so much.
Laverne Wilson.
Also a Stetson alum. I am Jamaican, and I like to say I'm a real Jamaican. What I mean by that is that I actually lived there. I went to high school there. I went to college there. There are actually colleges there. And then I moved here before my 21st birthday. And the reason I remember this is that I could not drink when I moved here for like 6 months. Because you guys have this age thing, which we don't. I'm also homegrown, so I've been with the firm my entire career. I like to say I've been dating Ford & Harrison for 8 years. They still haven't proposed. I'm in my second year of partnership, and my experience, has been great at the firm because obviously I'm still there. And I look at diversity a little different than others. I identify as being Jamaican. So if you, for example, have in a form African American, Hispanic, other, I'm probably going to check other because I consider myself to be Jamaican. I believe that with diversity, regardless of whether or not people want to believe it, it starts with the numbers. I think that's a baseline for looking at where you are in terms of what your numbers look like. And you also have to look at not only are you recruiting, but the bigger questions, are you retaining? And we've done a great job as a firm over the time in terms of retaining the talent, because anyone can recruit, diverse attorneys, but especially in a corporate law firm, everyone knows when you practice for 5 or 6 years, the goal is to become a partner. And in order to become a partner, you have to have a book of business, no matter where you practice. And so there has to be a mechanism to help your diverse attorneys and all your attorneys in terms of how to develop business and to become a partner and to get the recognition that they deserve. When I started practicing, my focus was not on being a Jamaican or a female lawyer. I just wanted to be a good lawyer. Because at a baseline, it starts with competence. So regardless of what your background is, if you're not competent, you're not going to get the work, you're not going to get the good cases. We've had some challenges, and because I don't want to sit up here and talk about how rosy it is at Ford & Harrison. Tracy knows the story, but when the firm recruited me, I was being courted by another firm for the summer associate program. And I waited to accept the offer. And at the time, the firm only had one other black lawyer who was out when I interviewed, but I never really interviewed with the black lawyer.
She was on maternity leave.
Yes, she was on maternity leave. That's right. And I was waiting to hear from the other firm because I wanted to go to the other firm. Not that there was anything wrong with Ford & Harrison, I just wanted to go to a general practice firm. And I received a call from her to have lunch. And I said to my mother, oh my God, I think they think I am not accepting the offer because I haven't met another black attorney. That is not the reason, but I can't tell them that I really want to go to the other firm because if the other firm doesn't pick me, they might not want me. So for years, I never told anyone this story. I ended up going to lunch with the partner, but I think I accepted the offer first because I just didn't want him to think that was the reason, because it wasn't. So we've had our challenges. There was the assumption that that needed to happen for me to go there, but that was just not the issue. So I'll leave it at that.
And Judge Julie O'Kane, one of my best friends at Stetson, and for the last 25 years.
Don't
now.
date us,
I
Tracy.
know. We're old now. Yeah. Julie and I are turning 50 this year.
Yes,
so
we are. So
I think we deserve some kudos just for showing up,
Yeah.
looking good.
and the way I look at it, we don't look 50. I
We
still
don't
feel
look
like I'm
50,
30.
we
So
don't look 50.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie O'Kane, and I'm a circuit judge in Orlando. Orlando is in the 9th Circuit, which comprises Orange and Osceola counties. I grew up in West Palm Beach and moved to St. Pete to attend Stetson for law school. And then after I graduated, I moved to Orlando, where I knew 2 people. I moved there because I got a job with a great firm, and just thinking about your topic today, I look back at the complexion of the firm when I joined it. I was the 12th lawyer. We had no people of color. Everyone was white at our firm, and all men except for me and one other woman. I was the first female partner at that firm, and I was there for 12 years. And then I got appointed to circuit position in 2003 when Governor Bush was our governor. Most people don't know it, but judges have to go to New Judges College, We do have such a thing, and there's a week in January and there's a week in March. And I was appointed in the summer, but you still have to go no matter how long you've been serving your first year. And so when I went to the January meeting, that 2003 was not an election year. So the judges that were attending New Judges College were all appointed by Governor Bush. And I was appointed when I was 37 years old, and at that time I was the youngest circuit judge appointed in our circuit. And so I was interested to see who my fellow new judges were going to be when I arrived, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that it was a very diverse group of judges in terms of ages, gender, ethnicities, races, colors. I mean, it was an incredibly diverse group, and I was very proud to be part of that group. I've been a judge now almost 12 years, and the majority of my time has been spent in criminal court. And in criminal court, we see many, many people from many different walks of life and many different backgrounds. The whole court system does. But in criminal court, we have some additional responsibilities that you might not be familiar with. First of all, in criminal court, the courts are required to provide an interpreter for any person who does not speak English. And so our court has Spanish language interpreters on staff. We have one French Creole speaking translator on staff, and that's it. But we have many people who come into our court system, particularly in criminal court, who speak languages other than those two languages, and we are required to provide interpreters for them. And that's obviously so that they can understand the proceedings. We are not required, however, to provide interpreters in the civil courts or in the domestic courts, except for domestic violence court. So if you are litigating in the civil courts, which probably a lot of you are, and you have clients who do not speak English, you're required to bring translators for them so that they can understand the proceedings. That's an important point for the judges because we want to make sure that your clients understand the proceedings. It's difficult enough when you speak English to understand legal concepts if you're a lay person. And judges, I think, do have a responsibility to make sure everyone understands their rulings and what the proceedings are. But when you add in the factor that you have litigants who don't speak English, it's that much more important for us to make sure that you're included and you feel part of these proceedings. And so I think our circuit has done a great job in trying to make sure that we have enough translators for everyone. 2 weeks ago, I tried a Spanish-speaking defendant trial, and we had 2 interpreters in the courtrooms at all times translating for the accused person because translators get tired and they really can only effectively translate for about an hour and then they have to switch to someone else. So the court system obviously has responsibilities to the community with regard to language issues. As judges, we're also charged with the responsibility to stop or call on the carpet anyone who is acting in a discriminatory way in the courtroom. And as most of you can appreciate, a lot of that is very subtle. And so judges are required to attend diversity training as part of our continuing education credits. So that's who I am and that's what I do.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about assumptions that people make or that they have made. A brief story. We are not perfect at Ford & Harrison. We're not here to tell you that everything we've ever tried has worked. Just recently, we interviewed a young lady from Stetson. Stetson does a great job with interviewing techniques. And she is Russian. She's in the top of her class, like Lewis was in Laverne. These were top students. This wasn't like we are not handing out jobs just to increase our numbers. These are the top people. She was very impressive. We asked her all of the appropriate questions, and we ultimately ended up offering her a job. I saw her a couple days after we offered her a job, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so thrilled to be clerking with your firm," and everyone was just so open. I love all your diversity programs. But now that the interview's over, I have a 9-year-old, so I'm a single parent. And I have to say, I went, what? How are you able? This woman works full time. She's like top in her class. And the first thing I thought to myself was, good thing you didn't raise that in this interview, man. I mean, we talked about it, because you can be the best person in the world. Your assumption is going to be she's not going to be able to do our clerking program. She will not have the time. Well, she's doing it. She's doing it right now. Okay, but that is what I would have thought. I would have immediately thought to myself, oh my gosh, what am I going to have to do? She's going to have to get out of here at a certain time. I'm going to have to like sign somebody else. So, what kinds of things, Catherine, for example, do you think you bring to the table that maybe you've had an assumption and it turned out to be wrong? Or someone has had an assumption about you that's turned out to be wrong?
I haven't had a whole lot of time to give this thought, but one thing that comes to mind is at the firm we had, at the firm we had, the Women's Initiative Network, which I think at the outset seems like a great idea, but sometimes I got the feeling that it's based on an assumption, well, let's let these women get together and solve their problem, and then they can come back to us and make some suggestions about how we can help them solve their problem, So I think when you're restricting the dialogue to a particular group of people, in some ways, it's the idea, I think, is let's give these women some opportunities that they might not otherwise have, but it can become a restrictive dialogue where you get the email for the diversity group. It's like, well, I'm not a woman, click, So, and I'm guilty of the same thing. If it's like, that's not my issue, that's not my problem. But I think it really does take a more holistic view to realize it is our problem. It's everyone's problem. If someone's struggling, it's everyone's problem. And so I think that is one assumption. I will say, I failed to mention this before, Duke Energy, it's just a really simple thing. But Duke Energy gives us 40 hours of time that we can take off for any reason, whether it's a sick parent, a sick child, a sick spouse. And it's just 1 week of time, but it's a lot of time. It's hugely helpful. You don't have to take sick time. You don't have to take disability leave. It's just a very small thing, but it's like, here, let me help you, help you balance a little bit. Mm-hmm. So anyway.
Laverne, I know one of the feedback that Laverne has given me is that I bring to the table an assumption that the only thing worth taking off for is your kids. Or you're sick, but if you're single or you don't have kids, you basically have no reason to take off at all. As far as I'm concerned, you nothing of value that you could do in your spare time equals what I am doing with my own family. Laverne, speak to that issue a little bit. When we talk about women and we talk about work-life balance and families, do we make a mistake by lumping everybody into sort of the same category with that?
And that's interesting because when you first said assumption, my thought was it's the assumption that work-life balance only matters if you have children or a husband. Yes, I'm leaving early for my nail appointment. Yes, I'm leaving early for my hair appointment. Yes, so that is the general assumption, because I remember when we first started talking about, these diverse issues and work-life balance at the firm, I think the assumption was Laverne is always available. Email Laverne. Call Laverne. She's always going to be available because she doesn't have any children to go home to take care of or pick up at school, or a husband to cook for. Not that I would ever cook if I actually had a husband, but that's besides the point. But I think that is the assumption, not only that, or for a maid, but in general, people think that if you don't have to leave for the soccer game, nothing you do is important. And me getting my hair and going to the gym, that's important to me. And that is what I do for work-life balance. And so I think, we have to get away from that notion. And even not just that it matters to women, but also men, because there are men with caregiver duties as well. And so the idea is that it should apply to all employees regardless of what their responsibilities at home is, because the idea of work-life balance is so that you're balancing work and your life so that you're not just working all the time, because you have a better worker if they have outside activities that they can relieve stress and they can come back and focus on work.
Yeah, and I mean, even as a female leader, the assumption is always that I'm going to be the most empathetic, I'm going to be the most aware of issues for everyone, and even I am bringing, biases even based on just family as a woman who's trying to balance those things. So it's critical to have an environment. If nothing else, probably I'm proudest of the fact that we have an environment where Laverne or Lewis or anybody could give me feedback that I can listen to and use. Because I don't know. I mean, I'm not, the purveyor of all things inclusion and diversity. I need people to tell me, how do you want me to treat you? What kinds of things are you thinking about? Because I only see it how I see it. And that doesn't always mean we're going to make changes, right? I mean, there are requirements, but I want to inform those decisions with what do I know about the person. Lewis, is there ever a point at which there's resentment on the part of lawyers of color in our firm or women? This is a little bit of a loaded question, obviously, because we know where I'm coming from on this, but that only we are the flag-waving banner carriers for these issues, and how does that affect retention in a law firm?
That is a loaded question. I guess let me take a different approach. I think it's a mistake, and I think I mentioned this earlier, for only diverse folks and diverse individuals or people that feel like they're diverse, to take the issue, to be an issue that only, this is something for, the Hispanics or the blacks or the women, this has nothing to do with me, therefore I don't care, or I'm not going to participate, or it should only apply to this particular group. I think it's an issue or just part of life, really. I don't want to call it an issue, where we all have to be involved. Everyone in the firm or whatever the practice may be has to take a part of it for it to be genuine and for it to have any effect. I think that's important. The other part, the thing I want to mention is there is some, I think there is some resentment sometimes from the diverse person in the sense that just because I'm Hispanic doesn't mean I want to deal with every Hispanic issue. For example, I have people that within my own firm or within just in general population where they assume that because I'm from Dominican Republic, I know every single thing that's going on in Dominican Republic, and they want to talk to me. Maybe they heard something in the news or some immigration issue. Or Lewis must be an expert. He's Hispanic. He must know about immigration. And the issues. And that's not always the case. Being diverse. I'm a U.S. citizen. I've lived here most of my life. It doesn't mean because you're diverse that you're in tune with every single diverse issue. So I think there's some resentment in that sense.
I'm just going to call you Julie.
That's fine.
Julie, is it better to treat everyone exactly the same, or what function does it serve for a judge to treat people differently, if at all?
That's a great question. In the criminal law, we have standardized sentencing, and that's could take up an entire day's worth of discussion. But, the legislature sets the laws, and they tell us in certain cases what certain sentences have to be. But a lot of times, judges have tremendous discretion, and so you have some people who may feel that every person, regardless of their circumstance, who's found guilty of an armed robbery is automatically going to get a certain sentence, regardless of what their circumstances are. And then you have other judges whose philosophy is sentencing is individualized to that person. And so, from my perspective, I always want to know as much as I can about the person who's in front of me, particularly if it's someone from a culture that I'm not familiar with. Because the more I learn about that person and their background, that might give me some insight into their actions. It may not necessarily mean that they get a lesser sanction than someone else in a different situation, but it provides some understanding, hopefully on my part, as to what the appropriate sanction should be for this particular conduct. Culturally, there are many differences with regard to certain types of actions, and the one that jumps to my mind is domestic violence. There's no excuse for domestic violence in any culture, in any situation, but different cultures approach that issue from a different perspective. And so sometimes it's important to know a little bit about that person's, background and their history and their culture to understand perhaps the motivation behind their conduct, and then, what an appropriate sanction should be. But we operate under the principle that there's equal justice for all. And so, you have to start out with that principle. I like to learn as much as I can about someone who's been found guilty or entered a plea to a horrible crime, because I'm interested to know what was their motivation, what is their background, what happened to them as a person that might influence how they got in front of me. There are many different variables, and when I first became a judge, my practice was all civil. I didn't even know where the criminal courthouse was in Orlando. We had separate courthouses at the time. I'd never been into criminal court. None of the partners at my firm practiced criminal law, so I knew nothing about criminal law, and my assignment was criminal. In our circuit, most new judges go to criminal or juvenile for whatever reason. And so I spent 6.5 years there as my first assignment. Then I went back to civil for 2 years, and then I came right back to criminal because I love it. And so when I first got there and I started hearing about people who are accused of crimes and hearing their stories, one of the first thoughts I had was the criminal courts in our state would be a great environment for a social science project, because there is so much going on in our communities and in the lives of people that we see that is interesting. It's sad, it's troubling, but at the end of the day, it's all very interesting, and we could learn a lot about each other and about our community if we came into criminal court and saw what was going on. And so, your question, Tracy, is a really hard one to answer, because everyone is entitled to equal justice. The legislature says for certain offenders, regardless of their circumstance, there's a mandatory sentence that I'm required to impose. But it's in those areas where we have discretion that it's important for me to try to learn a little bit about the person that's in front of me so that I can understand where they're coming from and hopefully impose a sentence that is appropriate for their conduct.
I don't know how I'm doing on time here.
Yeah. We're ending.
That's clear enough. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Renee. And thank you for this awesome panel and your openness with all of us in the audience. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tracy. What a great job, and thank you for sharing your very special video, and also for the kind of honesty. Weren't they wonderful? I mean, I think Tracy really started this idea of, can we talk honestly about what are some of the things that we see going well, but also where we trip up. And so this one theme that I heard throughout these stories is, this is not about someone else's problem. So I don't know whether those questions were asked in the spirit of inquiry question, like whose problem is this anyway? But I hope people know, that it's everybody's problem. Can we just agree to that as a group, that this is everyone's problem? Because when people haven't figured out how to make certain folks welcome or successful within their organizations, that means they're losing out on talent, like the lovely Lewis here, or they're leaving for other areas where they think they can actually bring their best selves, or we're missing in clients' work, or not seeing people for the individual and unique people they are, and trying to problem solve what would be helpful to support them. So one of the things that, one question was asked here is, what large firms like Ford Harrison is, that's one kind of firm, but they're smaller firms, and in particular, they don't have as many diversity initiatives. So one person asked, LGBT lawyers are at risk at losing their jobs or not being hired at some of these places. What are firms like Ford Harrison doing to educate the legal profession as a whole in the area, if anything? So that's a really fascinating question, again, about whose problem and to what extent and where. So do you want to say something about that, Tracy, just thinking about
Well,
it?
the LGBT issue is something that we frankly have evolved into addressing. At various points, Dawn and I talked about bringing people to speak to even our firm, and we had to feel like people were ready to hear that, which you gotta know your audience. So even at our firm, although we have a number of people who are out and gay, there would be a question to me about whether or not they could be their true selves at social events. It's certainly something that what we do is we try to learn. So Dawn and I and the rest of us, we want to hear how these issues are affecting, just like we do people of color. How are they affecting you? What are the kinds of things that we can do as a firm? We don't have all the answers. So we go to events, we invest in training. Some of this costs money. I know people have small firms, but if you're not willing to invest the money, we're no different than you. I mean, we all want to make more money too. So we invest the money because it matters to us and it matters to our clients. So if you're in a small firm, there's all kinds of resources that are free. The Florida Diversity Council puts on all kinds of events where you can learn about the issues that matter to people of color. I mean, we're not the only event. Of course, the bar associations have phenomenal training programs. There's books. One of the things that we did that I thought was probably the most impactful, we mandated that you had to go to one thing that was different than you usually go to. If you're Christian, go to a synagogue. You know, you're straight, you go to some event, you go to a pride event. Just something, you don't have to be comfortable there, you don't even have to interact with anybody, just go and just experience it. And we gave people points. So we made it money, okay? So if you didn't go, you didn't get the money. And that's just what we did.
I kind of like that money thing. Wish it didn't have to be like that, but
You gotta start somewhere.
incentives are important in this work as well. I guess what I heard you saying is, even at Ford Harrison, a large law firm, you are still working on how to be supportive in the area of LGBT issues. And I also heard you say that there are outside opportunities as well as inside opportunities. So it would be great to see firms and companies and in-house law departments who are making progress on this issue actually partner with or invite in smaller firms or individual shops that really could use that kind of partnership to bring that issue to their workplace. So if there's someone out there, and as you're talking during lunch and you're connecting with a larger entity and they seem that there are definitely LGBT employee resource group members here, there are obviously folks from large law firms and legal departments who are making progress on the issues of LGBT, and if you need their support, reach out to them and make a request, because I think this is a wonderful way for the community to really, for Ford Harrison to know that its commitment to LGBT extends beyond its own law firm, because it is part of a larger community, and organizations as well that have some more resources and actually are further along on the journey. I'm going to thank the panel again and allow you all to leave the stage. Thank you so much.